to season 3 of Menu Combat. I'm here joined with two amazing guests. This is Oscar, the owner of Halcyon Games here in Harrisonburg, and we're joined by Actual Lizard, famous Fire Emblem YouTuber. Both of you can say hello, introduce yourselves a little bit.
Yeah, I started my own video game store here in Harrisonburg. I do play Fire Emblem probably more casually compared to you guys, but I'm eager to see what you guys have to say.
Yeah, I'm Actual Lizard. Uh, I like Fire Emblem maybe a little too much. Uh, so I'm excited to chat about it today.
Most definitely. And for those who've been listening to the podcast, our wonderful friend Jeremiah is not here today, but he's the reason why I ended up making sure I played Fire Emblem Three Houses quicker than I probably would have taken. And he's not here today, but we have to just throw him out, shout him out, because that's probably one of the most popular episodes of Menu Combat so far. And so I think for all of us with Three Houses, I am curious, which route did you do first? Why did you do it? And yeah, let's start with that question to jump us in.
Sure. So I did Silver Snow first, kind of by accident. I picked Black Eagles initially because I felt like I mean, obviously none of them are the main character, but Edelgard's the one singing the theme song in the marketing material. It felt like they were kind of pushing her. So I
Okay.
was like, oh, we'll use Edelgard. And I remember getting to the part of the story where you make the choice that determines which route you go. And Rhea was like, Byleth, kill Edelgard. And like the option pops up and it's like, do it, don't do it. I was like, what do you mean? This is crazy. This is like if you played FE1 and it was like in the middle of the game, do you want to kill Marth? So I
Yeah.
clicked it just to see what it would do. Kind of I thought it was maybe going to be like a game over bad ending and then you like reload and like make the other choice. No, it was a whole different route. So I did Silver Snow first, sort of on accident.
Wow. That it's almost as if you remind me of the end of Dragon Quest where you face the final dragon. He's like, "Do you want to actually continue, or do you want to join my side?" And you were expecting that reload, same kind of.
Yeah, it would be like if that happened halfway through the game and like it
Yeah,
split into two totally different games for the second half.
it's nice.
I ended up choosing Dimitri as my main playthrough, and I think I have liked the idea of like a good knight. Clearly, his story goes very far from where that ideal, but that was the core appeal for me.
Uh, for me, I went with Claude, which you explained to me. If I remember correctly, he was more of a commoner of the
Mhm.
people kind of route, and that just I dug that, so I was like, okay, cool, let's go here,
No
see what
doubt.
happens.
Do you guys regret that first choice, or you feel good if you're that being your experience or your first impression of the game?
Um, I don't regret it in the sense that like I had a really good time in my first playthrough of Three Houses, but Crimson Flower has since become my favorite route. So I mean, if I could go back, I would make the other choice. But it was still a great run.
Yes. Okay.
I'm completely fine with mine, but I have to go through all the other ones, so I'll give it some time and then it's almost going to be like a whole new game for me.
Yeah.
So I'm still happy, but maybe I'll regret not going with someone else later. So to be determined for me.
I'm in the middle of my intended Crimson Flower route, and I think I made a good choice choosing Blue Lines first, mainly because the contrast between Dimitri and Edelgard feels so intriguing, right? Where
Yes.
they build up Dimitri to be this quite idealized person, and then everything that Edelgard says, even at the very beginning of her supports, lets on that she's like has so much else going on, versus where Dimitri is like, oh, he doesn't have that much going on, and so it's like I can now begin to see the paths divert.
Yeah, which is funny because I feel like they present when you meet them all, like Claude, they're like, oh, Claude's like the schemer. Who knows what he's got going on? And I feel like he's like the most consistent through the whole game, whereas like Edelgard and Dimitri both have kind of like a huge reveal in the middle. It's kind of funny.
You were right. He's kind of like, oh, almost as if being separate allows him this place to be playing them against each other, where
Yeah, yeah.
it's like it's not exactly that's not the case at all.
Now, how question for you, how much into spoilers are we going to go in? Are we going to avoid them, or
I think what it's 2019 is the original release.
has it been that long?
Yes, I know. So
Yeah,
I think it was 2019, 2020.
yeah, so I think it's fine. I
I
mean,
know it was before lockdowns.
yeah,
yes. So
yeah.
I think we're good for most spoilers, and it'll be spoiling for me a little bit because I haven't finished. the Edelgard route, but unless, does that bother you?
No, I mean
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
completely fine. I
And
am okay with
and
spoilers.
I'm sure you've done all four routes at this point, probably
I
more than
have.
you can
Yeah.
count. Uh, and then I guess we can go straight to the other questions I have. Who ended up being your MVPs in your runs? Like when you think back to your not just your first run, but other runs, like who has turned out to be like, oh, that ended up being a unit through like what they did for me on the maps was so great. I think for me, the amount of joy that I've gotten using Felix, honestly, all the sword users are great. Like I'm enjoying using Petra a lot right now. I feel I know there's no buff to Myrmidon or Sword Fighter as a class, but it feels like it. I feel like I could move around the map with them in ways that I had to baby them in other maps. Thinking about like I don't think I ever finished Awakening with long Q surviving, for example.
Yeah, I definitely think Three Houses is interesting in that like I mean this is true of every Fire Emblem game, but I think it's really true of Three Houses where you can make anyone really good. So like for me like the carries I feel like in your first couple runs are usually just like the units you like the most, right? Because you give them the lessons, you give them the stat boosters, they get all your attention. Um so like in my first couple runs, I really liked Hilda. Um because I just thought she was funny. Which is funny because when they did the promotional materials that I saw her, I was like, I don't know, I feel like she's maybe going to be like a little annoying and I'm not going to like her. Then I remember I did my first combat with her and she like whacks someone and goes like, Hilda, Hilda. And I was like, that's hilarious. So I used her a lot. And then Catherine and Shamir, I would say, are pretty big parts of my army in every playthrough.
Mir is the one trying to make sure I use in this run through because I know nothing of Shamir. I'm like every
Oh,
I see her
you're in
tutorial.
for a treat, I think. I like Shamir a lot.
See, this is where me being a casual guy is gonna like just I just use the lords typically, and then like the heavy knights if I really get into trouble. But like that's the extent. Like you guys,
Hey, I mean, this is a good game for that because
yeah,
the Lords
Yes,
are real good at this one.
yeah,
I feel like the game is designed to make sure that they get the best level ups quicker than everybody else.
yeah.
They just have I mean they have good stats, good skills. They've all got their personal class and their special weapon. It's just so funny remembering like when I was a kid and I started with FE7 when that came out and the Lords are I would say mostly on the average to below average side. And then like you play Three Houses and I'm like, "Oh my God, Edelgard is killing multiple enemies a turn, moving twice on player phase. Like it's crazy."
So where did you guys start in the Fire Emblem? Like, which was your first ones?
FE7, that
FE7?
I when I was in Jamaica, I don't know how me and my friend got exposed to it, but being in Jamaica, we were exposed via emulator. It's one of the first emulator games up until I got a physical copy of Sacred Stones when I moved to the United States.
Yeah,
So that's my first start in.
gotcha.
Yeah, I started with seven. I was pretty young at the time, uh, and I didn't beat it. I was like too young. Fire Emblem was too hard for me. But then Sacred Stones came out, and I beat that, and then I went back and did seven after that. So seven was my first one, but eight was the first one I finished.
Right. I got you guys remember when 3DS came out and they did the ambassador program?
Yes.
I got that and I was like, well, they gave this to me for free. I might as well try it. And I was like so like kind of liking it, but not understanding it fully. And then once I got through that one, which was Sacred Stones, if I remember correctly,
Yeah.
then I went on to picking up the GameCube one, the Wii one, and I just kind of went back right before the series really took off with Awakening, which was really nice to see. Like finally it hit the mainstream. Well, it's mainstream something like that can hit. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember Awakening was crazy because I would have been in high school at the time, I think. Either high school or right before college, I'm not sure. But it was I remember when 12, which was New Mystery of the Emblem, right before Awakening, didn't come out in the US.
Mm.
I I wasn't sure we were gonna get Fire Emblem anymore in the West. I was like, damn, maybe that's it. And then Awakening came out and it was like Christmas morning for me. I was like, it's back.
Series saved. Yeah.
It's funny when I think back at that Awakening era because I started buying my first amiibo were Fire Emblem amiibo because I was like, I don't know if Fire Emblem will still be around. So I will now hoard all the amiibos possible. And I didn't like Awakening as much as I wanted to.
Really?
It's Fates that
Okay.
really made me like, oh, okay, I'm happy again.
I was the opposite. I actually really liked Awakening, and Fates kind of lost me, not gonna
Mhm.
lie. Um,
I've had very like a tumultuous relationship with Awakening. I loved it when it first came out, and I feel like half of that was just because I really thought I was like never gonna get a new Fire Emblem game. So I was like any like criticisms I had right when it came out, I was like, you know what, I don't care. It's it's Fire Emblem, it's fine. And then later I was like, maybe I don't like this as much as I did when it came out. But recently I've been playing it again, and I'm like, maybe I was right the first time.
You got me wondering what it would be like to go back with this now under my belt. And I finally went back and replayed seven, finally finishing it because I could never beat it as a kid. Like you said, I never even beat Sacred Stones as a kid. Now that it's now out on NSO, I will right that wrong. I got to chapter 16, the desert map, and I basically got walled there.
Yeah,
little
I've
older, so I was able to finish that one, thankfully.
well, I do hope you get a chance to play it on NSO. That one's my favorite, so I hope you enjoy it.
I think I will. It is weird to say out loud, but finally finishing seven and like the connection I have to seven of like pushing my taste in this direction, finally beating it made me very emotional. I was just like, I've been obviously seeing Roy properly with Ellie. I was just like, oh, this feels different because it feels like I completed my genesis of my RPG taste.
I remember that ending being so funny to me. Funny to me now, annoying to me as a kid, where they show Roy at the end. And I was a kid. I wasn't like I didn't understand that there were 6 games before this one. But I knew Roy was in Melee. So
Yes.
I saw Roy at the end and I was like, all right, great. The next one's gonna have Roy in it. Um and then to this day we still don't have that one yet.
Uh yeah, one of these days, I'm sure they'll remake it at some point in time.
I hope so.
I wish they had kept the Echoes branding going and giving us those that we never got here.
Yeah, it felt like that was
The plan?
yeah, right. Because
Yeah.
they could have just called it Shadows of Valencia, right? Like it could
Yeah.
have been Fire Emblem Shadows of Valencia. It felt like Echoes. I was like, okay, so Echoes is going to be like the name of the remakes.
Yeah, that was going to be like the Pokemon Legends of
Yeah.
Fire Emblem.
Yeah, and I guess I mean maybe it still will. Maybe they've got more remakes in the pipeline,
Yeah.
but it feels like it's been a minute.
I'll
Yeah.
I want to believe, but
I mean, I'm looking forward to anything that they do, really.
Yeah, I'm dying for news at this point. I'm like, if announce anything, I'll be happy with it.
my Switch 2 purchase will be faster when I see it, is basically how I feel.
Yes.
Did you
Yeah,
did you
I'm
get
in
a
the same
pre-order?
boat.
I did not.
Yeah.
I think for me, of the Nintendo franchises that matter the most to me, Fire Emblem, Xenoblade, Kirby. So I'm like, I haven't seen those three yet. I can wait. Well,
Well, you got Air
Air
Ride.
Air
Riders,
Riders,
Air
yeah,
Riders. But that's not what I was thinking. But
yeah.
yes,
That's a monkey's paw. Yeah.
call it
Yeah.
Monkey's Paw. I'm happy for the Air Riders fans out there, but it's not what I was waiting for. But I guess with that being said, I want to. There's so many places we can go here. I think since we're talking about characters and what ended up being characters that you carried you, just what were some of your favorite supports or favorite interactions with these characters? Because I think the thing that stands out to me with this game, thinking back about other supports, thinking Fates and thinking Awakening especially, the the way that supports here work, I think characters are able to be more hostile with one another, and through hostility they build a bond. Where I don't feel like that was always the angle that they wrote from before. Am I misremembering? Because I can't
I
that can't be right. Go for it.
Yeah, I think it changes a bit from game to game, but Three Houses I feel like definitely has a higher volume of antagonistic supports than especially more modern Effie. Like
Yeah.
Engage has very little of that. Fates has a little, I think, especially in Revelation, where kind of you can have like the Norians support the Hoshidans.
That makes sense.
And like some of the older ones have that too. Like you get like in FE7, Matthew has the Jafar support where he's in the C and B, he's basically like, I'm gonna kill you, Jafar. So you get a little bit of that, but Three Houses feels like it has more of it than usual.
Yeah. I think thinking about Felix being in, consistently annoyed at Ingrid has kind of always stood out to me. Where Ingrid consistently highlights, like, you came up with a really good battle plan. You're really strategic and thoughtful. And he's like, just get away with me. Get away from me. I don't want to hear this flowery language. I don't want to engage. And maybe it's just because I think Felix is just an antagonistic character overall. And maybe that just bleeds into my memory. So that's one of my first favorite ones that just exists between a couple of folks. What are some of yours? I'll end up talking about Ash and Ingrid as well next.
Two that I really like that you just had me thinking about because we were talking about the antagonistic supports. I like Byleth's support with Hubert a lot. Um, I don't know if you guys have read that one, but it's pretty funny. The first few levels of it are basically Hubert like being kind of distrustful of Byleth and protective of Edelgard to the point of like threatening Byleth, which I find amusing. But I think it also I think it's an interesting character dynamic to have this character who is so loyal to Edelgard and not you. It's just an interesting dynamic that I feel like you don't get as much of in the other games with the avatars. Um,
That's a good way to say it because I thought you were going to go with the fact that I think Hubert portrait screams classic Fire Emblem villain. It screams that, and so I thought you were going to angle. But you're right. I think in this age of self-insert avatars, he's probably one of the ones that's actually most hostile to you, and not, but still supports the main, I guess, Lord.
yeah. And then the other one that I like a lot that also has some of that antagonism a little bit is the Byleth Leone support, which is because I feel like a lot of people don't like this one, specifically the one after Geralt dies. It's a time gated support, so you can't get it until like it activates right after that happens, where Leone is like very upset and like kind of mad at Byleth, and I feel like a lot of people don't like that one and are like, oh, she's so mean to Byleth, and I'm like, yeah, but it feels real to me, you know? It's like you have this kid who's like essential like it's like imagine if you were a kid and like Superman came to your village and saved you um and like then later you like witness Superman like I don't know, it makes sense to me that from her perspective like sure it doesn't it's not fair for her to be mad at Byleth, but it feels very authentic to me. And then I feel like it's handled well in like the next support too, where they kind of unpack that a little bit more. But
I like
I think that's why I like the antagonistic supports is it adds a sense of authenticity where like I don't know, sometimes people don't get along, or at least not right away.
Yeah, it's better than like, oh, I need help practicing my sword swings. Sure. And then that's it. You know, it gives it a little more texture.
yeah, I hadn't thought about this. Like, I guess it makes them feel more like real people in that sense.
It's cool to see how it's come from like those very simple interactions to what we're at now and what we could possibly get next.
Yeah, it's always funny going back to like FE6. It is not like a knock on FE6. Obviously, it was the first time they did the system.
Mm.
Right.
Makes sense that it wasn't quite as robust, but some of the FE6 supports are like, hello, hi, nice to meet you. Here's this thing I do. Nice to
Yeah.
meet you. Goodbye. Like, it's got some good ones too, but the conversations have come a long way since the GBA era.
You have me thinking about something I took for granted playing this, and now you make me wonder what the future of it will be for creating supports on. I think map two. When you move people and you start killing people, and all the students are like have their own comment about their first killing. I'm wondering if that's just a natural place for supports to be more reactive in whatever's happening on that map, and that
Yeah,
adds some nice texture to these characters.
I think that's the biggest like limitation of supports in their current implementation is that they're like not very reactive. Three Houses did this a little bit with some of them being time gated. Like you had like the Leone one can't happen
Until
until Gerald dies. But I do think like if anything they can do that makes them a little more reactive to things happening in the story is great, right? Because
Yeah.
like, I don't know, it just makes it feel more authentic, right? If like, oh, right after the chapter where the students kill somebody for the first time, maybe that could trigger a support, you know? Like maybe there are things like include like you could have time gates, but you could also have conditions, right? Like,
And
okay,
like
maybe
hidden support.
mm,
yeah.
But,
So I don't know. I think there's like ways they could make the system more reactive that would be cool.
yeah. And it would encourage replay.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. This might be the first time I've ever heard something where I'm like, I wonder if there was already an achievement system built into the Nintendo brand that this would be a more natural choice for designing supports. I'm not an achievement person, but I was like, I feel like thinking about reaction in this way, that would at least wondering wherever the designers are thinking, that would at least incentivize them to think about it in that way.
Achievements always felt like one of the more Nintendo things that Nintendo doesn't do to me,
Interesting.
because it's gamifying playing games, and I don't know, that feels like something Nintendo would do, and they never have. Well, not
I
on a
think
large scale.
I think that someone from Nintendo said in an interview or something recently that they didn't want to do achievements. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I feel like I read that. I mean, obviously,
I
I
got
guess they don't want to do them because they haven't, right?
Right.
yeah,
They could have if they wanted to.
yeah.
It makes me feel, yeah. Normally, I get the spirit of like we should replay games out of the intrinsic value of the experience, but thinking about just like what we're talking about, I was like, huh, this would change some ways of thinking about the game.
Yeah. I think that in my mind, like if I had to step into Nintendo's shoes and guess why they don't like do achievements, when I think about something like Breath of the Wild, like a lot of the ethos of Nintendo games seems to be like I don't know, kind of like play for the joy of playing, right? Like you play Breath of the Wild and it's like you collect all the Korok seeds and you get the stupid
Right.
thing that doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
And like I feel like that's like Nintendo's way of saying like, if you want to get all the seeds, you should do that because it's fun, right? You should do it because you want to, not because we're going to give you something cool at the end. Um, maybe I don't know. Maybe that's kind of part of their reasoning.
I would agree. I think it feels like they don't. I don't think they dream of people playing at least Zelda games, but I don't even think maybe Fire Emblem is the only game franchise where they expect people to do the, I guess, 100% to an extent. I'm thinking about all their other franchises. I think when they go more open, they with the expectation of like you follow your desired route. I feel like with Fire Emblem, it's more of like do them all because they all got great stories. I feel like that's the only. Maybe I'm not thinking of something. Is there something I'm not thinking of where they have?
No, I feel like in Fire Emblem games recently, they have been pretty expecting of the player to like get all the recruitments and stuff. I think that used to be a little less true in the past. Like you had stuff like in Path of Radiance on the GameCube. Like there was stuff you were going to miss in that game on your first playthrough if you played it blind. I remember Stefan, you need to like park a Laguz on a specific space in the desert. Otherwise, he just doesn't show up. Um, and it seems like they don't do that as much anymore. Now it feels like they want you to see everything.
That's a good point. Which I guess makes it now more interesting at how they designed the Silver Snow route, hoping that you'd see both options in front of you in some way.
Yeah. They did also, the Three Houses developers did also do that interview that I thought was interesting, where they said their expectation was that most people would just play one route. Um,
Yeah.
which I thought was interesting that they said that.
I understand. Like, so I'm on the replay right now, and I remember going into your Discord and I said, "Hey, I really loved my first playthrough. I didn't. The monastery wasn't as bad as I thought." I remember catching myself saying that first time. Playing it now, and it's particularly because I'm seeing the monastery as a barrier to quote unquote new content. It's warped my view of the monastery, and now I understand to an extent why they'd be like, "Oh yeah, someone would be full." And they may not go through the process of the monastery, even though there's a new game plus.
Oh yeah, I think their expectation was probably like, I don't know, your first playthrough of Three Houses takes what, I don't know, 40, 50 hours. Like it's a long game. And they're like, I don't think people are going to do it 4 times. Evidently they were wrong,
Yeah.
but I understand why they thought that.
That was, uh, I think the next question I was going to ask: what are some of your favorite maps? What are some of the ones that stand out to you? I've been trying to remember. Them. The one that comes to my mind, and it's a side story. It's not a part of the main line. I've kept on trying to search it again, and maybe you'll remember the side story. You go into a basement, and there are like six juggernaut enemies that have all the shield stuff designed, and you have a bunch of mages. Your entire core crew is separated in half, and really felt like it was the first map well, not at first, but it's like it's the map I felt like I had to engage with these beast enemies in the most interesting way because of how I guess how beasts work. Having the I guess the shield, having to use your gambits to break the shield, not having every character not having gambits, having to monitor them throughout. I felt like that placed that mechanic on the forefront more than even some of the story ones that have the dragons embedded in it.
Trying to put my finger on that map.
Yeah,
The side stories are tough because some of the side stories I've only played once.
right. Yeah, I feel bad that it's a side story. It's just like I know that's the one that comes to my mind. If I had to pick a main story one, it's chapter 6 with your first experience, I think, with the Flame Emperor and somebody else, and the different routes you can take, the teleporters, all of that. That was fantastic.
Yeah, that is a cool map. I like that that one is on a that one's on a timer, right?
Yes.
But like a pretty generous timer, if I remember correctly, which
And
I liked because I felt like it didn't like it wasn't too restrictive. Like I didn't feel like I was like, oh my God, I gotta get moving.
yeah,
But I also felt like I was like, okay, I can't just turtle and take the enemies one at a time for the whole map.
yeah, that I think that I was turtling a lot, which is what I tend to do, but that final I think the final space before you enter the main room, I had a few turns left, and I was like, okay, I have to be more aggressive, intentional, and thoughtful at the same time. And I appreciate it. That's when I was like, it was just enough time to be a little bit conservative, but it was enough time to push me to be aggressive in ways that I don't always like to be.
Hmm.
I'm the worst at like always trying to get treasure, and I always end up losing because of that when there's a timer. But you know, that's what the reset is for now.
Yes, the
Yeah.
divine pulse. Yep.
Yeah. I think my favorite maps, I love the first battle at Gronder Field in part one. Uh the three-way battle is really interesting. I think the goal of killing the most enemies to get the bonus is kind of a fun objective. It's funny though, the game presents that as like you need to kill the most enemies of the three groups. But it's actually, I forget what the number is, but you actually just have to kill a certain number of enemies.
Oh,
And it doesn't matter how many the other armies kill.
oh,
Um,
hold on.
which I didn't realize. I'd done like 6 playthroughs, and then someone told me that, and I was like, "Oh, that's crazy." But I liked that as a side objective because I thought it lent itself to kind of the player having multiple strategies they could take. Like if you wanted the bonus reward and you were feeling bold, you could like charge ahead and like kind of fight both sides at once. But if you were like, oh, I don't know, my army's a little weak, maybe I'm playing on maddening and I don't want to fight all the enemies at once, you could let them fight each other for a bit. But if you did that, it was also a trade-off because if they killed enemies, they got like a little buff. So I don't know. I just thought that was an interesting map. I liked the dynamic of the two armies fighting each other. Um,
The reward.
and they kind of did that again in one of the Falzino log maps in Engage, which I wasn't the hugest on the Falzino log, but I thought that was one of the cooler gimmicks in that DLC. Um,
What would you say is a key reason why you ended up liking it a little bit less than Engage than what you enjoyed in Three Houses?
oh, in Engage, it had nothing really to do with the map itself. I just thought the Falzino log was made in an odd way where like it didn't scale. So like you had like the units at set levels, which was fine, but it did bring in like the rings from your playthrough and the skills from your playthrough. And like you had these new units, but on higher difficulties, it felt like the new units just got stomped. Um, so I don't know. I thought the map itself with the two armies clashing was cool. It was like the other stuff about Falzino log that I didn't love.
Yeah, I have to get engaged sooner or later.
Oh, you haven't played it yet?
No,
Okay.
it's
I started it, but I haven't gone through, so don't feel bad.
no. This is where the infinite backlog exists forever at this point.
Yep.
I will say, I know I just complained about the Falzino log in Engage. The main campaign of Engage, the gameplay is pretty great. I think you'll like it.
I hope so. I've been excited to play it. I've had certain friends who are not excited for me to play it, but I'll put it this way. I love Birthright. Birthright is my favorite Fire Emblem game, and it has little to do with the story and so much to do with me enjoying those maps, which is why
Oh, I think you're gonna like Engage just fine then. Because I have criticism. I mean, I have criticisms of the Engage story, but I thought the gameplay was really fun.
I am excited to try that. Which I guess leads to we can come back to maps, but I've wanted to ask this for both of you all. I enjoyed how weapons worked in Fates, where the stronger weapons lowered your accuracy, had more weight, prevented you from doubling some of the times. And so the choice between weapons wasn't just this weapon is stronger, but also considering your character stats, making those choices. I love that. I miss that. I don't mind where we are now, but it's one of those things where I'm like, do you guys miss that approach to weapons, or do you prefer where we are right now?
I want them to try it again at some point. Because I thought Fates, like I know the weapon system's a little controversial, and like people don't like they're like, oh, I don't like using the silver weapons because it gives a debuff, or like, I don't like the weapons giving a debuff or whatever. But I don't know. Have weapons ever felt more distinct than they do in Fates?
That's I was gonna say, I don't even feel like the special weapons here in this game feel that special, right?
Yeah.
What is it, the 10 weapons of the heroes?
Yeah, yeah.
I do like there never being a clear-cut answer. I mean, I've played stuff like Monster Hunter where there is
Mm.
no ultimate weapon. It's figure out what works best for you and then go with it, you know? It gives you choice and you can experiment and see what you like rather than, oh yeah, just go for this and you're gonna win.
Yeah. I also do think that like sometimes the FE community, and like I've certainly done this, can like play a game 8 bajillion times and like figure out all the best stuff. I'd be like, oh, this is like wait, I'm gonna use in Fates as the example. Like we'll say like, oh, it's lame that like you just forge a bronze sword and that's better than a lot of weapons. But I never see anybody do that on their first playthrough, you know? Like, and I feel like, yeah, if you play, like, how many games can you play like 50 times and you don't realize on the 51st playthrough that, like, okay, maybe some options are better than others. So, like, I don't know. Maybe they could balance it differently. I would want them to tweak it, but I loved that the weapons felt different in Fates. And I want them to try it again. Like, I thought the only other game where weapons felt super distinct was in Echoes. I think they feel pretty unique because they have the combat arts attached to them.
Yeah.
Um, but like in so many games, it just feels like often the difference between like an iron sword and a silver sword is just that the silver sword is just better. Um, so I like that. Like in Fates, there was like a little more to it.
That's at least that's why I like that. It's funny you bring up combat arts because maybe that's why the weapons feel more disposable. At least I don't know if you for you two, I'd be I would catch myself using, say example, my Ferdinand is not great right now, but I'd use all of his combat arts with his lance to try to make him more useful. And I'd be finding myself at the end of chapters more often than not as like, oh, I do need to get a new weapon to replace what I just did. And so I think the at least maybe this is more reflective of my playstyle, which is why I'm asking both of you. Do you feel that combat arts change how you see the weapons or how you approach them?
I would say yes. Um, in my mind, I think of it like uh, the last playthrough I did was a maddening playthrough, and definitely there are maps where I'm like, okay, this map is scary. I just want to kill the boss and get out of here. And on those maps, like, oh, maybe I'll do something like a warp, and then I'll have like my archer on a wyvern or whatever run up to the boss and then use their like brave combat art that lets them hit twice and hopefully kill the boss. And like when you're doing that, then it's like all I really care about is how big is the might on the weapon, right? Because of like the combat art's going to make you double. So all I really care about is how big is that damage number. And then I would also say like this is more relevant in the early game when I feel like you don't have as much money or forge resources. Um, Sometimes I feel like I will use like a weaker weapon because I'm like, oh, I want to use this combat art, but it like takes 5 uses off the weapon. So maybe I don't want to use that. on the weapon that only has 20 uses, and I'll like use it with the iron sword or whatever because I'm not worried about that breaking.
And I'm learning so much from you guys.
I think what made me start realizing the combat arts were interesting is how much they were weapon specific. How that you only had access to certain approaches. It did start to get annoying where I'd be like, "Oh, I gained this through instruction, or I gained it through something else," and I'm like, "Oh, I should use this," and then realize I don't have the weapon for it because I'm not building the character in that way.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where it depends. Like I feel like how fun that is depends on like the kind of player you are, right? Like if you're like the kind of person where you're like, "Oh, like I love like building units, looking at all the stuff they can get and figuring out like how can I combine these things in like a fun and interesting way," then it's like really exciting because there's just so much stuff that Three Houses units get. Um, but if you're the kind of person where you're like, I don't want to look at any of that. I just want to play the game. I want to get the cool combat art and then I want to use it. Then like then it could be annoying if you're like either you get the a cool combat art and you're like, oh, this isn't like great for the way I built the character, or like you finish the game and you're like, oh, he had a cool combat art if I trained him in axes. It sucks that I didn't.
That now you're making me realize when I go back, I'm trying to decide what I want to do with Casper, and I'm like, should I go? I've been saying I want to do gauntlets because I didn't use gauntlets in my first route. Now I'm like, oh, I should check the combat arts before I make any decisions between gauntlets or axes for Casper.
Yeah, gauntlets were cool. How do you feel about gauntlets? Because those were new.
Because I didn't have him on my side, I felt like facing those enemies was there's certain enemies where I felt like I am going to be bum rushed and these guys will not survive. And so they created a sense of fear because sometimes they get the 4 times 4, create some good chip damage. I'm thinking about the amount of times I've lost Dorothea and because I was not thoughtful about where I placed her around these. And so in retrospect, I feel like there's maybe more to what they can do with the gauntlets, but actually a nice touch, right? Like I think they are unique enemies, right? They're the only ones that you're gonna get 4, and you're going to have to figure out what to do with that speed on you. Because the only other folks who do that would be either the assassins or thieves or some myrmidons. But I feel like you would apply your weapon triangle lens on those characters in ways that I don't apply that to the gauntlet folks.
Yeah, I thought they were neat. I think it's always tough when you want to like add a new weapon where it has to be okay, like what makes this new weapon unique, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I feel like even in some Fire Emblem games, like swords, lances, and axes just like don't feel that different.
Yeah.
Um, and especially in Three Houses where there's no weapon triangle, so you don't even like you don't have that. So it's like, well, what is the identity of this new weapon? And I thought like being able to like basically always being a brave weapon was cool. And then I thought it was neat that their combat arts, if I remember correctly, more often than other ones, focus on like moving enemies around. Like there's gauntlet combat arts that are like you punch them and then you move them and you one space forward, or like you punch them and then you like flip them to the other side of you. And I was like, that's an interesting thing for gauntlets to do. And kind of like sets them apart in my mind. I'd have to go like actually look to see how much more often they do that than other weapons,
Yeah,
but I feel like they do it more often.
was there any other weapons that did that?
There's probably I think there's a couple of lance options that
Okay.
do something like that where they like push you back or you can move forward.
Yeah, yeah. But I think the gauntlets do it the most often.
Yeah.
You know what would be cool now that we're having that conversation? We should, if they come back, attaching what the ninja or not the ninja, the knife or kunais did back in
Yeah.
the States where it was often some form of debuff on you could be a nice touch. Like if you needed to make it a little bit weaker, but it debuff you in your accuracy or debuff you in your defense for a turn or two. I think that would give them some good pressure.
Yeah, I'd be cool with that. I thought the ninjas were sick in Fates. I'd be happy if they came back in any form.
Yeah, they're I'm trying not to make this a Fates convo, but those I love them. I love the ninja class, and that is just seriously one of the coolest things I've ever thought of. Which I guess, I guess going asking you and asking you when you were building your team, how much forethought did you have? Like, I feel like on their first playthrough, they tried to not show you. I think they don't show you the. I think they show you up to advance. I mean, they don't show you anything else that's coming afterwards, which makes me feel like when I'm doing the instruction, like I can't really plan ahead. Like on one hand, the idea that I'm playing a Fire Emblem game where every character is a trainee, which is one of my favorite things about from my experience over Sacred Stones, is cool. But if I can't really prepare, slash, I don't have any frame of reference of where to go, I almost, I feel, I felt like when you get to end game, you can't really pivot. You kind of are stuck with where you are. And because you don't have the foresight, at least at times, I kept on trying. I forgot, I think I was trying to get Ash to learn how to either, I think you need the armor for Ash to turn into the Bow Knight, right?
Mm.
Or is it,
I
or is it
think
just
Bow
something?
Knight is Horse Lance Bow.
So trying to trying to go mid game, get Ash to learn how to ride was just one of the most painful experiences I remember having.
I mean,
Yeah.
oh,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I usually put no forethought whatsoever. This is where the more casual,
Right.
user comes in.
Did you ever do the auto instruct then?
Really, no. It's been a while. I haven't
Yeah,
played since
yeah.
2020, whenever. Um, but usually I'll go back like a few years later and then actually like try to learn
Right.
everything. I'm probably overdue on that playthrough, but I'll update you when I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say on my first two, maybe three playthroughs, I did approximately zero planning.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
like I had to do with the units what I want to do with the units, whatever strikes me at the time. But nowadays I do a decent amount of planning, not like a ton. I don't usually like make a spreadsheet for Three Houses. Which I have occasionally done for other games. But I'll like maybe I'll like open a notepad doc and be like, okay, this is the class I want for this unit, just so I remember like, okay, what are the things I need to train? But I agree with you that I think it's annoying that they don't show you the requirements in the first. Did they show you in the second playthrough? I don't
They
remember.
do. They do. That's why I've been able to
Okay.
look now and be like, okay, I know what's coming up. I can make choices now. And I was like, I appreciate the graciousness of the second playthrough, but I'm like, I'm trying to get in their heads of like, why would you want to prevent folks from being, I think if you could pivot easier,
Mhm.
like maybe if the arena allowed you to get extra just,
It's an easier train your
right,
guide. It's
and train them just in the skill,
yeah.
maybe that would have been a nice compromise.
Yeah, if I had to guess, I think the logic with the master classes is that most of them aren't supposed to be like straight upgrades on the previous tier, although like some of them are. Like I'm pretty sure the Master Wyvern is just better than the previous Wyvern. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think that's true. But like some of them are like Mortal Savant is not necessarily better than like all of the classes in the previous tier. So I think they were like, oh, the master classes are like a nice surprise and it's okay if you don't get them. And I'm like, okay, but I want them though.
Right.
Um like
Yeah, I wonder what they'd have to do to communicate that better. Because I think you're right. There are classes that it's supposed to be okay if you don't get them, but because they show up, you kind of like, but they feel like the next upgrade.
Yeah, and I think it's different than like I would say an area where they hid information, but I think it works better is with like the like budding talents that students have where you can see that there's something there where they're like, okay, if you train this ability, you will get a reward. I'm not going to tell you what the reward is, but there's a reward. Um, and I feel like that worked because it was like, I don't know, it was like a happy little surprise, right? You're like, okay, I know if I invest in this, I'm gonna get something. Whereas with the master classes, it's more like you get to the end game and they reveal them, and it's like, oh, let's see if maybe I can't do any of them. Like it could be it could be an unhappy surprise. It's like, oh, now you're just taunting me with this cool class I can't use.
That yeah, no, I think that has been the most interesting. You got me thinking about, do they hide anything else at all in this experience besides the hidden roots, right? The budding talents.
Spell lists, right? Like you don't know
That's
what level of faith or reason is going to unlock
right.
what
It's unique
spells
to each
for which
character, right?
student. Yeah, yeah, it is. Like I think the big one that jumps to mind is Lysithea has a couple relevant spells for the early game where like if you really invest in her reason or faith, you can get them a little early. Like I know a common strategy for like if you want to kill the Death Knight. It's not the only way to do this, but a common one is if you really pump up Lysithea's reason, she learns that spell that like does extra damage based on the weight of the enemy. And like, the Death Knight's loaded up with armor, so she does like 8 bajillion damage to him. Um, or like you can pump up her faith and get warp really early, and then like on that one map that I hate where it's like that big winding route and you fight Miklon at the end and then he turns into the big monster. You can like if you pump up her faith rank and you're feeling spicy, you can like warp a boss killer over the wall and like they can just run
Oh,
up and kill Miklon. And you don't have to walk all the way around. But it's kind of scary if you do that because he turns into a monster, but the enemies don't go away. So like you have big monster Miklon and a bunch of enemies. So it's like a little scary.
that sounds intense. I hadn't. So those are strategies I've not played around with. I've been just enjoying the fact that Matt, as a person who misses, we talk about the weapon triangle not being here. I also miss the magic triangle. That was always cool, but I think this is probably the coolest use of magic to kind of give characters their own unique personalities as a result, or at least distinctions in ways I've grown to at least feel like they have personalities or they became like right now, what is his name? Lindhart, right? The
Yeah.
one who likes to sleep a lot. He the fact that he gets access to heal and psychic so quickly has changed my entire perception. Like, okay, I like you. You are able to be useful in ways that so far no one else in your team has been able to be useful. And that gives you a personality because I'm like, I like having more explicit healers, but I also realize this game has ways of you not always thinking about it in that traditional sense.
Yeah, I like the spell lists. I think it differentiates the units a lot more. Like I feel like in some of the older games, I mean, like obviously the units are still different, but like when I think about like in Sacred Stones, the difference between like Sale and Loot is like pretty much just stats and circumstance, right? Like it's like one joins earlier, one joins later. These are their stats. One of them's a pre-promote. But in a broader sense, they do a lot of the same thing. Um, whereas in Three Houses, I remember like that Dorothea gets Meteor, but doesn't get that spell Lysithea has that I was talking about. And Lysithea gets that, but doesn't get Meteor. I'm like, okay, these are two very different mages, right? Like, if I use one or the other, it like actually changes what I do with them as units.
And I think there are a couple of different mage classes at different places where I'm like, you start to want to build them in different ways because I think there are two different dark mage classes, one where you need the dark seal, one where you don't need one. Stuff like that where you start seeing like, oh, okay, they're pass, and that's just a choice I'm going to make based on what I think their spell list is telling me.
Yeah. I think the only thing that I would change about it is I think there are a few too many units that just have like garbage spell lists. Like I'm okay with that for some of them. Like I get it, not every unit is going to be a good mage. Like I feel like that's not different than like in Engage, if you take a unit with a bad magic stat and make them a mage, they're not going to be that good at it. But I think there's like a few too many units in Three Houses where it's like, okay, my spell list has like nothing special and it's just like the basic spells. So I would like more units to have a unique spell, but overall, I like the system a lot. I think it makes more interesting mages.
Yeah, which this is not a clean jump, but I'm thinking about your recent video, which I haven't gotten to fully watch, but it makes me think. I've been thinking about this now. Part of what I think happens is that with all these recruitable characters, with all the ideas here, even though, as you highlighted in the interview, that there's a chance that one route is one choice that someone will make. Do you think this idea of having multiple routes is still valuable to you all? Like, do you, at least I get the impression, maybe you get it too. I don't know if you hear it as much. I hear folks be like, I just want one core route and that's all I want to be. I don't want to have to do all of this additional work. And I'm thinking, I hear that both for this, but also for Fates, where I'm like, the writing can get thin for folks. I don't feel that way, but I'm not sure if you all feel like if you were to wake up in a world where Fire Emblem, what is it? This be 20? Right? What number Fire Emblem are we at?
Oof. Let me think. Awakening was 13, Fates was 14, Echoes 15, Three Houses 16,
Okay,
Engage 17. So 18, or I think Nintendo counts Heroes. So 18 or 19,
19.
I
depending if
don't
you
count
count
it.
Heroes. I don't count Heroes, but I think Nintendo does.
Yeah.
So for 19, would you want to see the continual use of routes, or as I said, I'm not down to watch a video. Are paths better as approach than routes? I guess I don't know if you see those as distinctive. In my mind, I'm like eight has a couple of paths. I think Shadows of Valentia has a couple of paths, but it's
Yeah.
one route.
I I like route splits. I don't think they need to be in every game though. Like I don't know. I like ones that don't have it. I like ones that have it. But one thing I would like to see them return to is you just mentioned like kind of paths versus like full routes. And I kind of like that. Like I think in FE7 and FE6, there's like a couple points where it's like, okay, there's like a one or two map deviation, and then we come back.
Yeah.
Uh, and I don't know, I like that. I feel like it makes your playthrough a little bit different. It lets you make a choice without introducing like the developers having to make like four different games.
Right.
I'm fine with multiple routes. But, everyone's different. With Fire Emblem, I know I do hear in the shop that some people feel like the older ones that are a little more linear are a little more old school, and they're like, I prefer the newer stuff because you can have a bunch of different routes and different characters. So consensus I hear is they prefer the newer style. And I think it's been doing well enough for Nintendo that they're probably going to stick to that.
I was gonna say that does track with like when I talk to, because I talk to a lot of people like having the Discord, but also like I try to talk to people that aren't like 24/7 Fire Emblem brained to get other perspectives on it. And I also get the impression that like I mean people love Three Houses, right? Like I know like in FE spaces it's become like a little more like criticized lately, but I feel like in the broader sense I don't know. People really like that game. People like making their choice. Even in Fates, I remember like Fates has obviously been criticized too, but people were excited, I think, about picking which whether they do Birthright or Conquest, or at least I was when the game came out.
Yeah. I, I how do I put it? I entirely agree. I think I enjoy that. I think in a paths world, it'll just make life easier in the sense I've been thinking about triangle strategy, where there are a couple of moments where the story starts deviating, but there are options to deviate earlier to get side chapters. I mean, there are options later to like regroup, I mean, continue. I think maybe allowing something closer to what they did. I didn't like their golden route, but just the where changes happened. Like I'm imagining as I'm replaying it now, as opposed to waiting, I think it's chapter 11 is where everything starts to really detour. If the detours were earlier,
Mhm.
or even the detours were later, like say that the detours happened at 17 and therefore you weren't locked in, like I think this is where the challenge is. Replaying this game requires you to do the beginning setup of the core concept,
Mhm.
where I'm like, if you make the choice later to pivot in multiple different ways, you can make a safe point at that point in time to experience later game content. And I think maybe that'd be easier or more easier to appreciate to do split the paths later overall.
Yeah, it's like I think a tricky thing because there's always a push and pull between like what can I do that makes the game the most replayable versus like what can I do to make the first playthrough the best it can be, right?
Yes.
Because something that I think like is interesting about Three Houses is that they make you make this choice at the beginning before like with not like pretty incomplete information, right? Like you don't really know these characters. Um, and then you're locked into it, right? Um, and even if like you could pick Dimitri or pick Edelgard and then like halfway through the run be like, oh, I kind of like the other one better. But you can't switch. And I feel like that's like I don't know. I feel like that's a little bit part of the game's message is that you're kind of locked in on that route. Like you made your choice. Um, and like, I don't know, there's like a bunch of things you could do to make the game more replayable. Um, but it's like, what effect does that have on the first playthrough? Maybe sometimes it's minor, maybe sometimes it's more major. So it's like tricky, I think.
They could go like the Zelda route where they do put out a game that's like Breath of the Wild, open choice, whatever you want to do. And then they're still putting out the smaller 2D top-down Zeldas that are a little more linear, a little more old school. They could go back to the Echoes branding with that if they want to do that.
I think in a world where the Switch wasn't what it was, that would actually be a cool dual life as Fire Emblem,
Yeah.
where there are these games that are, I guess, basically what Dark Deity has tried to kind of do, which is an experience that is closer to where seven, four, five, six, and seven were, and then 3D being where we are now.
Yeah, it would be interesting, I think, if you have because I think you have a pretty like clear differentiation in like the design ethos from like IS and like Awakening Fates and then Engage, which obviously all have their differences and like innovations and experiments, but I feel like there's like a pretty clear like design through line between those games. And then like Koei Tecmo taking a very different approach with Three Houses. I wonder if like obviously I don't think Nintendo's gonna like buy Koei Tecmo, but like if if somehow Koei Tecmo became like the second Fire Emblem company, and it was just like you had an IS making Fire Emblem, and then you had Koei Tecmo making Fire Emblem, and you just got like and you just staggered them, so you get one, then you get the other, then one, and then the other. Um, I
I
don't know. It would be interesting.
think I think that'd be fantastic, right? Where it's like at least you get you're getting both flavors or multiple flavors. And maybe I'm just
Yeah, but I obviously that's just my pipe dream where I'm like, what if they just made 8 different Fire Emblems a year so that everybody could be happy?
I,
That'd be great.
I would deeply enjoy that. So I guess I'm trying to see what other things I want to nail on. So I'll just ask the first thing. When you found out what Edelgard was doing, how did you feel? Like that, like reveal from your angle. Same for you. Because I think for me, I did not watch any of the promo stuff. As I said, I came to this much later because I wasn't sure if I would enjoy this because of the monastery stuff. And so I wasn't following anything. And so I don't think any I don't think I was spoiled until like midway through my playthrough. And even just still seeing it was like, they really did this. Like they really I was still shocked, even though I was partially spoiled.
Yeah, I the framing of that whole scene was surprising to me. I mean, like I said, when they had the option where they were just like, "Do you want to kill Edelgard?" I was like, "Oh my God, what?" um, so I was pretty surprised. But like I said, Crimson Flower is my favorite route. So as you may suspect, I still like Edelgard. Um, I don't know. I was very sus on Rhea from the very beginning. Um, so I don't know. I was down with Edelgard. I like Crimson Flower.
I think on replaying right now has made me be so much more suspicious of Rhea. Even the stuff that the I think Lord Lonato says. I was like, oh, right, they did tell me this at the very beginning of the game. Like my brain, I think that's the one thing that always stands out with these routes is that when you finish a route, you don't really have a complete story. Like it actually doesn't feel complete. But I'm so invested in the characters' arcs that I kind of didn't. It's not until replaying where I'm like, all right, I don't really know what happened with Red Canyon. Like I'm like, what really did happen here? I remember having all these questions and I just threw them away for what the core thing was happening with Dimitri, which I think speaks to appreciating how they wrote the characters. But it's just one of those things now replaying, I'm like, oh, I still don't know everything about this game.
Yeah, I think it's interesting where I feel like Three Houses almost has like 5 stories. There's like the story of each route. Like I think each route kind of tells its own story that like I think the Blue Lions route tells Dimitri's story. And I feel like you get a complete Dimitri story at the end of Three Houses. But then there's like And then I think that's true for each route. And then there's also like the over-encompassing story of Three Houses that I feel like that's the one where you don't feel like you have the complete picture until you play all of the routes.
Kind of like an Octopath thing, where you go through one route and then you're like, okay, how does this fit in with this? And then
Yeah.
what am I looking at? And then you get the full picture.
Yeah. So I still feel like so I'll ask you because I think you and I have only done one route. I'm still in the middle of my second route. At what route did you feel like you actually had the full map of Fodlan's life?
Oh, well, I have unfortunate news if you're planning on playing all of them, because my answer is never. Three Houses does leave a lot of questions unanswered, um, for which drives some people crazy, and some people are like, "Ooh, I like to think about it," so I don't mind that it was open-ended. But
Do,
yeah, Three Houses does not answer every question.
do you think they could do a Three Houses 2 situation?
I mean, Three Hopes is like
Is it?
not Three Houses too. It's like an alternate timeline,
Gotcha.
but it does like get at a lot of the questions from Three Houses and then introduces a bunch of new ones. So
Right.
I would say we still have an equal amount of unanswered questions. But
What would you say is the unanswered thing that you're like, I do actually want the answer to that, right? Like, because it sounds like you don't mind that there are open elements. And as I said, I think the character writing is good, but I don't mind that I won't get all the answers. But is there something you're like, I wish I did know that though?
I think the politics and how like those who slither in the dark play into the tragedy of Dusker, and then Dimitri's childhood is really interesting. And I feel like we do not get like the full details on exactly how everything went down with that. And I don't know. I would be interested if we did, because I think there's like a lot of directions one could take with that.
Now, how would you want to find that out? Would you want another game? Would you want an anime? Would you want, I don't know.
Oh,
So
right.
I'm okay with just not knowing,
Okay.
personally. Where I'm like I'm all right with it if they want to be like this is an open-ended thing. We want you to think about it and come up with your own answer. If they were going to do another thing, I don't know, make Three Houses 2, I'll play it.
That's the one thing I thought I was going to get an answer to. So I'm glad you let me know that in
I
advance.
mean, you will get some more information about it.
Yeah.
You just won't get all of the
The
information.
which side note, that makes me think of Dedu and how they treat Dedu in Dimitri's route. I was just glad he was still alive. Like the way that he's might be the first character where I'm like, I did not see this fully, and I actually thought he was gone because I think he's like 4 chapters in upon the post time skipping. I'm like, man, he's actually gone. Like the impact.
I thought so too. Because then they give you Gilbert. Like he
Yes,
goes and you get Gilbert, and I was like, wow, he goes and then they give you a replacement. Um,
it was, yeah, that was. I, I was glad to have him back, but I was like, the impact of feeling that he was gone. I think that's something that I was surprised that they toyed with, and I feel like that even. I remember feeling like, oh, I must get all the monastery people, no matter if I built relationships with them. I thought I would get a chance to see Manuelo or what is it, Hasaman,
mhm. Henneman.
Hanneman, and or Alor. I thought I'd get to see all of them because I'm like, oh yeah, they were not tied to a class. I should see them. Seeing that they were willing to, because obviously you kill different classmates, but not seeing them made the impact of that chapter feel truly like
Yeah.
something else.
I think that's one of the things that is cool about the first playthrough versus like the repeat playthroughs. I feel like the first playthrough um didn't recruit everyone. Like I wasn't paying enough attention to the systems to figure out like the fast ways to recruit people. So I recruited the people I liked the most and everybody else I didn't. And then you fight them in Act Two and it's really sad. But whereas nowadays when I play like I have to if I want to experience that, I have to stop myself from recruiting everyone because I'm like, okay, I know how to get everybody. Um, but if I do that, then I feel like Act Two doesn't hit as hard. So
But I am just trying to do the church folks. I'm trying not to rely on any Blue Lions folk. Oh, and just do. the church folk as my secondary folks.
Yeah, and I guess there are some people on each route that like you could just never recruit, right? Like you can't if you're not Blue Lions, you're not getting to do. Um, so I guess Act Two always at least has a few familiar faces that you'll be sad to show up on the enemy side.
But I feel like the more I'm talking about this game, I'm like, I maybe even liked it more than I thought I did.
I feel like that's always how it goes when I talk about Fire Emblem, where I'm like talk about all the cool stuff. Like even if it's a game that frustrates me, I talk about all the cool stuff, and then I go back and play it, and I'm like, ah, here now I remember all the stuff I don't like about it too.
Though when I told my friend I still prefer Birthright and Seven over Three Houses, he gave me a lot of flack. But now I was like, now that I'm talking to you all about it, still reflecting on the supports, thinking about all the things, where I was like, maybe I like this more than I realized.
I think Three Houses is just such a it's such a departure from like the series norms where like I don't know, like if somebody tells me like I liked Seven or Birthright better, like I don't, but I'd be like sure, I get it. Like they're so different, right? Like
Right.
I would just be like, okay, it's such a different style of game that like maybe like that one better. But um so that's part of why Three Houses is so interesting to me. Is that I think it's probably one of the biggest shifts from one game to the next in a series. The only other ones I can think of are like Awakening was a big shift, and Radiant Dawn was pretty ambitious in how it was structured. But other than that, like Fire Emblem games usually you play the previous game and you play the next one and you're like, okay, I see how we got here. It feels pretty familiar. Um, but Three Houses, I was like, whoa, this is different than the last two.
Most definitely. Like I now understand why this game has always been what is the meme? No matter whatever happens, there's Fire Emblem Three Houses.
Oh, the another 4 years of Three Houses discourse. Yeah.
Right, like two options in front of you. And I get it. Like there's so much here that as I said, I think when I told you in the Discord, I was like, oh, I'm glad I chose to play it because I was fearful of the monastery interrupting my experience. Now that I've actually experienced, I'm like, don't know how I feel about the monastery on my second playthrough, but it's been a joyous thing to think about.
I like it on the first playthrough. I feel like on the first playthrough, everybody's saying new things. It's like it's exciting to hear what everybody has to say and interesting. And so I don't mind doing it. Whereas now, if I do like a not new game plus playthrough, like just a regular new game, then it's like a chore, right? I'm like, okay, nobody's saying anything I haven't heard before. I'm just doing my little tasks so I could get to the next map.
Honestly, I think the thing that if you removed the auxiliary battles, I think it'd go quicker. I think that's the one thing I've been thinking about where without that, I might enjoy the monastery more.
Yeah, and it's a little tough because like I feel like oh yeah, you could just like
Yeah.
choose not to do them, but like I don't know. I feel like myself and Fire Emblem players in general hate leaving resources on the table, right? It's like, okay, I don't have to do the auxiliary battles, but they're right there. Like, like why am I not going to do them?
I feel there are so much of the EXP experience to build your characters that it's like, and maybe just us Fire Emblem folks are compulsive people to play these things. That might actually be the end result that I need to think about.
But like it's something I've thought about a lot with video games in general, but I think Fire Emblem in particular, where there's like a lot of stuff in Fire Emblem where people will be like, "Oh, I really hate this thing," where the thing is something you don't technically have to do. Um,
It's the classic, I could go straight or I could take the other route, see
exactly.
what's
And
there.
it's so interesting to me that players, including myself, will so often do something that they're like, "This is not fun, and I don't have to do it,
Yep.
but I'm gonna." Um,
Maybe there's
and I
something
think it's
cool.
like, yeah. So I think it's like interesting to think about from like a game design perspective, like is it bad to like I guess it like it's probably when you put stuff in a game you have to think about like is this reward compelling enough that people will feel like they need to do it? And if so, is it fun? Because if
That
it's not, people will do it anyway.
that and then saving that ultimate item and never actually using it.
Oh,
very
that's
convenient things.
such a Fire Emblem problem too. I feel like everybody does that where they're like, they get to the end of the game and they're like, oh, haven't used this legendary weapon yet. Still got full uses
That's
on
it.
it.
Yeah, yeah.
I think what's most interesting is that I'm not that person in other games to I need to see everything. I think there's something about I think you said it's because in Fire Emblem it's a limit of resources. Your entire at least my brain shifts in this world versus when I play another game, oh, I don't need to do that side content. I'm good. The main path is the main path. Fire Emblem is very much of, well, if I don't do this, this will cause a hindrance in the future. I need to my
Yeah.
entire brain.
I think it's also like a little different than an RPG because we were tweeting about Dragon Quest the other day. In Dragon Quest, you know that if you get stuck later, you can always grind. I'm not going to get permanently stuck. But in Fire Emblem, I mean, you're probably not going to get stuck in Fire Emblem either, but you don't know what's ahead. And it's not like if you do get stuck later, it's not like you could go back and grind. So like I feel like people feel more compelled to they're like, let me make sure I get all of the stuff that I can so that I don't struggle later. Because if I struggle later, there's nothing I can do to fix that besides like I don't know, come up with a better strategy. But you can't like go grind like you can,
Right.
you know, in Dragon Quest or whatever. I mean, I guess you can in some Fire Emblems. I wonder if people like do less of the unnecessary tedious stuff in games where grinding is available because then you know you have that safety net. I don't know.
That's a good question. Now I have to wonder what folks do for Sacred Stone specifically because of the what is the tower called? Tower of
Yeah, the Tower of Volney
yeah. Uh,
or like Awakening had like the grinding maps, or Birthright has them too, right?
yes. Which I guess that I did not feel that way in Awakening as much, although I'll not use this special weapon until the very final few maps.
Oh yeah. I no game seems to have found a perfect solution to me holding on to an item for the whole game.
I don't think there ever will.
Well, I think the only solution to that, but the problem is people hate it, is like if you really don't want people to hoard, is like limited inventory spaces. Like in like Resident Evil 1, I don't hoard because like I've only got like 5 inventory spaces. You know, whatever you pack, you're going to use it,
Yeah, use
especially if
what
you
you
want to
got.
pick more stuff up. But people
It's a fair
hate
point.
that.
Because was it in seven? How does the convoy system work? Right? Things there's a limited convoy before it upgrades, right?
In 7, it's like you don't have the convoy until
Right. Until
13, I think 13X,
right.
which I technically you could miss that and then you get them in 17, but I think most people it's like hard to miss that guide.
Right.
Um, and then he has like 100 spaces in his tent. So you know, if you really hoard, you could hit that.
Yeah, that might be maybe a modified version of the convoy might be what's needed to get people to push forward. I think
Yeah.
I think if you do that though, you have to limit the amount of characters you can have on a playthrough.
Yeah. Well, it's also like interesting, like I don't know how like getting people to use abilities. I feel like part of it is also that like something I've noticed in a lot of Fire Emblem games, you'll get like a warp staff or whatever. And a lot of times people don't really use it because it's like pretty obviously powerful, but it's got like 3 to 5 uses.
Yep.
But in Three Houses and Engage, people do use warp. And I think it's because like in Three Houses, it's like on a spell list, right? So there's no reason to hoard it. You're gonna get it back next map anyway. Um,
That's
and then in Engage, there's a lot of them. Like it is limited, but it's like a lot less limited than 5 uses. And then you also have like a ring that has a warp effect that so like you know you use that, you're like, okay, I see how warping works now. Maybe I'll use this staff that does kind of the same thing. But like I don't know, I feel like people get the warp staff and sacred stones and they're like, I'm gonna put that in the convoy and leave it there.
man, I've literally done that. I think I've only used warp twice in my Fire Emblem history. I don't even I've not even used it in Three Houses.
Yeah, I will say to be for warp in particular, I also think some people just don't think warp is fun, which is, you know, that's fine.
I think yeah, I wouldn't say that. I think it's that same hoarding mentality. And then I think I get scared of warping a character to a place that they will not survive.
Warp can be scary to use for sure. It's like a little different than like rescue, I feel like has like an obvious safe application where it's like, oh, I put the flyer in range of the archer. Let me pull him back. But warp is like, all right, if I warp him in between five enemies,
He's
are they
on.
gonna live? Let me let me do the math.
I think, on I guess a separate side note, what do you find yourselves to be more aggressive when you play Fire Emblem? Do you find yourself to be more turtly? And do you think the game incentivizes you to try strategies that you normally wouldn't as a result?
For me, if there's treasure to be looted, I'm gonna take my time, unless there's a timer. But you know, and then if I lose, I'll try something new. But honestly, I'm not like that hard up on sticking to any one strategy.
I think the same thing. Treasures, the minute that I know that a thief is coming on the map, I'm like, okay,
I gotta get there and kill him.
I gotta move faster. I can't be patient. I can't do any of the things that I think my natural inclinations are. And so I always appreciate that, even if I'm not excited in the moment when I see one show up.
Yeah, I would say the more familiar I become with a game, the more aggressively I play it. Like on first playthroughs, I play like pretty conservatively. I'll be aggressive if there's like a side objective and I feel like I have to be aggressive to get it. But like um the more I play, the more like familiar I am with the enemies and the maps and where the reinforcements are going to come from and what treasure chests actually have something good in them. The more aggressively I'll play.
That makes me feel a lot better when I watch your videos because I was like, I always think about your videos as talking to a first playthrough person. I'm like, okay. And the way you've described, I forgot what you described, but move specifically being an important way to change how you play. I'm always not always you taking advantage of that, but I feel like, as you said, it's like once you become more familiar, you're willing to like push the systems further.
Yeah, I think Fire Emblem's interesting because like oh, there's so many ways to play it. Like whenever we talk about like a unit being good in Fire Emblem, it's so like dependent on like what you like to do. Like I mean in here we can talk about Three Houses. Um Lysithea, a lot of people really like Lysithea because she has warp and like warp is really good for certain strategies. But if you don't want to do those strategies, like like I would say Lysithea's warp is good because it lets you like hop over the wall in Miquelon's chapter and like kill him. But if you don't want to do that, and the game doesn't make you do it, the only reason to do it is if you like don't want to walk all the way around, then who cares? So so I don't know. It's so like context dependent what like is good in Fire Emblem.
I think I'm I think for the first time now that I have to consider that more because I have been mainly more like where you are is like I'm more casual in my experience. I think watching your videos has gotten me, and obviously doing this podcast has gotten me to try to put more words to the experience and to the appreciation. And I think it's got me to consider what I'm doing in different ways and try to get me to do things I normally wouldn't. I think I when I play RPGs in general, I tend to be more conservative in how I do strategies. But I'm like, especially in the era of Divine Pulse, I shouldn't always be as scared as I tend to be.
Yeah, that's something I like about I don't think every map needs to do this, but I like Fire Emblem maps that will push you out of your comfort zone a little bit. Like, excuse me. I know I was saying I liked the first Battle of Gronder Field earlier, and a lot of that is because I do think it doesn't make you come out of your comfort zone, but it kind of encourages you to, right? It's like you will be rewarded if you kill these enemies instead of letting them kill each other. So I like that it kind of incentivizes you to be like, hey, take a risk, get after it, and we'll give you a reward. But one of the things I think is nice about Fire Emblem is that it is usually accepting of multiple strategies. So like it's like here's your reward if you play fast, get out of your comfort zone and take a risk. But if you don't want to do that, it's not like they put a hard turn count on it, right? They're like if you want to take your time, you can. You just won't get the funny reward at the end of the map.
Which now reminds me of a different map I like because one of my favorite mechanics that always happens is when bosses move. I think that gets me to also play more aggressively because I'm like, I can't just be conservative. I'm trying to remember the name of the map where there are ballistas on the side. There are like two different ballistas, magic ballistas on the side. There's one main funnel room. There are two other paths on the side. You are all the way at the throne room. You have like a bunch of flyers on this side. You have a bunch of knights on this side. Do you remember what map number that is? Because I think that is post time skip after you first reunite on the Blue Lions.
This is immediately after reuniting. Immediately after reuniting is Hunting by Daybreak. But I don't think you're describing Hunting by
No, not Hunted by
Daybreak.
Daybreak.
Um,
I think it's one of the ones right after that. And I'm trying so hard to remember.
and I'm so bad with map names.
But I think it's because it has the multiple magic ballistas. And when I started moving my way down the map, there would be, I forgot who the boss is. If I remember who the boss is, it'd be easier. But the boss starts moving the minute that you get closer to them and carrying all their enemies with you. And I was like, oh, I should not be dumb here. But I also now know that I have now moved into enemy territory in a way that I need to actually pull everyone down from where I was and be prepared to respond to what's about to happen.
Is this the one in the monastery?
It might be the one in the monastery. I
Because
think.
that I know that's got three paths.
Yes.
I don't remember if it had ballistas, but I know it had those three
Yeah.
paths.
So yeah, I'm gonna say yes. I'll probably double check, but it sounds right. Yeah,
Yeah, that is
oh
a cool map if it's the one I'm thinking of.
yeah. If we're thinking the same one, then fingers crossed that we are. As far as someone in the audience is like, you talk about this one, you should have just said it, but
And it's hard. There's so many maps in Three Houses.
there's so many.
I can't remember the number of all of them.
No, and then honestly, replaying the Fog of War map with Christy, not Christy, the one who has the sword again. The
Oh,
like
Catherine.
Catherine. That's what I was saying.
Yep, yep.
That Fog of War map is actually really solid. I think I'm starting to just enjoy Fog of War maps more.
That that map did something. I don't think another FE map does this. I could be wrong, but that map is super memorable to me because I remember you when you kill that one shaman, and then you get the scene of like Catherine walking through the fog. What a great introduction for that character. And then the fog goes away. And
Yes.
I was like, that's different.
I think more moments like that on maps would do a lot for just character development, going back to our earlier support conversations, but also just feel like you are making changes in larger ways.
Yeah, I mean, because I agree. I think giving characters little introductions like that is great because I don't know, it made Catherine super memorable. Like of the knights, I think she gives the strongest immediate impression just because of that chapter and because none of the other ones really like have a chapter like that. And some of them have side stories, but you don't get those until a little later, and even then they don't have like a cutscene.
Yeah. I guess part of all the stories that more cutscenes for Fire Emblem will always do good. Can't ever complain about that.
Yeah, that's true. That's my very reasonable advice for intelligent systems. Just make a cutscene for every character. Make 50 more cutscenes per game.
You're not wrong. I think you can. It's probably not physically possible, but it would be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. That I guess with that, I think we've knocked out a lot of the questions I had
Mhm.
and perspective. Were there other things you wanted to add? Oh, I don't think I got your perspective of how you felt about the beast enemies, how they work in this game. That's probably my last
Oh
thing.
yeah, I think they're cool. I felt like Fire Emblem has done big enemies before. Like you have the Draco zombies in FE8 that take up multiple tiles, but they're pretty much just normal enemies, just big. Whereas the beasts, I think like actively change your approach to like how you fight them where I'm like, okay, like you want to use your gambits. It even changes how you set up your gambits because like I feel like if I want to fight a bunch of beasts, I'm like, okay, I got to bring some gambits that like do damage. I can't just bring the utility gambits that I like. Um but most importantly, I think is that they do not feel like normal enemies, which is I think the biggest accomplishment of that because Fire Emblem I think can sometimes suffer from like enemies being narratively special, but then when you fight them, I'm like, okay, it's just another red unit. Like,
Just has higher HP.
yeah, yeah. So I like that they feel very different to fight.
Yeah, I mean that's what I kept on thinking about is that I like that I felt like I always got punished when I wasn't considering what I was doing around one of them. I enjoyed that they often were more aggressive, and really you had to use all of your units gambits, and then you had to like monitor that as an additional resource. Where I feel like on other maps, I'd be like, oh, I'll just use my gambit because that makes life easier right now.
Yeah. And it even made you think about like I remember like when I play that map with Miklon, where he turns into the monster at the end. Like yeah, it makes you think about how you spend your gambits and like even like how you're letting units get attacked because I don't know, it helps if you have a lot of gambits when you fight him. So like I've had times where I play that map and I get to the end and I'm like, oh, I don't have a whole lot of gambits left. And it makes it a lot harder. So now whenever I replay it, I'm like thinking about that, which is cool.
I, I, if there's anything I want to see going forward is finding more ways to make enemies feel that different than the regular units. And I understand you can't place too many in a game like this, but if they had a third special category of enemy that gave you some other way to play.
Yeah, I think that you'll find some of the stuff they do in Engage interesting. Um, I'm not gonna spoil it for you, but there's some interesting enemies in Engage.
That's good to hear. That was good to hear. Literally every time I hear someone talk about Engage, I'm like, I have a strange feeling I'm going to love this.
So do you have a copy yet,
I
or
don't have one yet.
okay?
That is, I've been trying to figure out where am I going to fit in another Fire Emblem game yet, and so I'm hoping end of this year I can actually do that. Because I'm like, what is it longer than Three Houses? Would you say?
I my playthrough was shorter.
Oh,
Um, but I don't know. I think it just depends how you play both of them. I watched a streamer I like do a Three Houses playthrough and an Engaged playthrough, and her Engaged playthrough was longer, but
okay.
mine was shorter.
Yeah. At least that lets me know. I know my immediate goal is to finally finish Sacred Stones properly to avenge my childhood, and then
That one's a short game.
that's what I
No.
appreciated. Like when I played FE7 when it hit, so I was like, wait, this is a nice brisk experience in a way that yeah, I miss because what that's probably 20 hours, and that's might be overshooting it a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, and Sacred Stones is even a little shorter than that one.
And they were handheld games,
Yeah,
so they were meant to be, pick up, play, put it
exactly.
down, come back later.
And so I know there's an easier way for me to fit Sacred Stones into my life where I feel like Engage, for no fault of its own, has now fallen into the Zelda Tears of the Kingdom life where I'm like, I want to play this, but where am I going to fit it in my life?
Yeah, it is one of those things where, and maybe this is just because I'm an adult now and I was a kid then, but like, or maybe it's just because we're on like consoles now and not
Yes.
handheld consoles. But Fire Emblem does feel a little less like pick up and play to me now than it used to be. Like when I was a kid, I don't know if I had like half an hour, I'd be like, I whip out the Game Boy, play a bit of a Sacred Stones map. Whereas now it's like I got to pencil it into my schedule. I'm like, all right, it's my tonight we're playing Fire Emblem. That's the thing that I'm doing. Um,
Yeah, when
so
you're like 13, you can pick a Saturday and just start from the morning, play till the night, knock it out, but not anymore.
That I feel like I think that's what made my first playthrough of Three Houses so surprising. I knocked it out in like 2 weeks, and I'm like, where did I find these 2 weeks of
Nice.
my life to go not probably was a little bit long, but like it felt so short. And I was like, how did this happen?
yeah. Such as
Such as
the being an adult and wanting to still play video games.
without a doubt, without a doubt. I guess so. With all, I think we've knocked out most of the stuff. Is there last things that you guys want to ask or close with as our final
Um,
Three Houses thoughts?
I guess for both of you, what other games like Fire Emblem would you guys recommend to people?
Uh, I'm
I've got a couple of
I'm gonna go Triangle Strategy. I think
Triangle
that
Strategy.
is still. I think I still like that more than Three Houses right now.
Mhm.
I think the main difference is that Triangle Strategy is not as customizable, so you lose a lot in that direction. But I think I liked your interaction with maps a little bit more of what you could do, but that's just because the job classes are very different.
Yeah, I'll co-sign Tri-Strat. It's a good game. I think the best SRPG I played in the last year that wasn't Fire Emblem was Unicorn Overlord, which I really enjoy. It's a little different than Fire Emblem. It's not grid based. It's like sort of real time. It's like real time, but you can pause it. It's like when you're ordering your troops around, everything pauses, and then you unpause, and everything goes where it's going to go. But I think for people that like Fire Emblem, I think will like Unicorn Overlord. It's got supports. It's got a lot of the same like themes and aesthetics. It's a good game. I like it a lot.
I wanted to play that because it looks a little bit like Ogre Battle 64, which is another game I wanted to play.
Very much like that in terms of gameplay. Oh, it's also it's a vanillaware game, so it's beautiful. Um, just really a great aesthetic.
Without a doubt.
I'd recommend. Have either of you played Shining Force? Those games on Genesis?
I only played a little bit of the first one on Genesis.
I've played maybe 10 hours of the first one.
Yeah, that and Valkyria Chronicles. If you guys have played either of those,
That I
love
haven't.
those.
That one I have played.
Those are
Well, I've played one of them. It was
yeah,
good.
yeah,
I have that bought, but it's on the infinite backlog.
yeah. We all got
That
that.
one's a very different that's a pretty unique one, Valkyria Chronicles. Not too many games like that. Both the kind of
I feel like Codename Steam tried to be kind of similar, but it
yeah.
wasn't.
I both like the kind of like I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. I like it's not fantasy, but I want to say like fantasy-ish military. Like it's like military with like a fantasy vibe almost. Um
It's almost akin to like Cyberpunk,
yeah, yeah.
something in that realm.
Um and then kind of combining the strategy RPG mechanics with
Fantasy
like
punk.
the actual aiming of the
Yes.
weapons. It's kind of cool. Like not too many games do that.
Okay. I think we got a couple of good choices for people. Was there any last things you wanted to say? So I know that's what you want. Anything you want?
No, I think we covered quite a bit of Three Houses stuff.
Most definitely. Most definitely. I just want to say thank you to you both to come
Yeah.
on the episode.
I learned a lot. Thank you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
No problem. Where can they find you both on whatever social media you want to share with them?
Go ahead.
Yeah, YouTube, Twitter, Blue Sky. Think I'm actual lizard on all of them. I think that's true.
Nice.
Okay.
Instagram, Halcyon _ video games. I'm getting stuff all the time. If you guys want to see some cool video games coming in, you can check me out on there.
Literally behind us, we have Path of Radiance, Radiant Dawn, Lufia Tool. Like he's got a ton of incredible stuff here. So, and then Bulls Den 25 on Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok. You know where to find me. And then at Menu Combat for the podcast itself on Twitter and Blue Sky. And that concludes the first episode of season 3. Thank you all.
Yeah.